and welcome to the CodePrep Podcast, the podcast that highlights different ways you can get into tech. Today, our guest is Angel Banks. She is a UX UI designer, a speaker, and co-director for Women Who Code Atlanta, which is one of the top 10 chapters in the world. So, Angel, can you tell us a little bit more about your role in tech and what does that mean on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So I'm a UX designer for at First Data. So I basically work on enterprise applications. In addition to that, as you mentioned, I'm a director at Women Who Code Atlanta. So we have monthly meetups and events for supporting women in tech. I'm also the lead for Women Tech Makers, which is a part of the Google Developer Group meetup here in Atlanta. So that also I do a monthly meetup and a DevFest Atlanta conference once a year. And yeah, in a new conference actually I'm working on with Erica Stanley and Beth Lang called Refactor.tech.
Amazing. So what led you to your current role? Like what drew you to this particular field?
So my mother been a UX designer for a very long time, and she always tried to get me into it, and I don't know why, but I just did not want to do it. So she did talk me into actually going to a web development boot camp, though. So I went to General Assembly, went through the web development immersive program, and I did do some front-end development for a little while, but I think maybe my mom always knew that I was kind of better suited for the design. I think maybe my background in strategy and kind of customer service and customer experience maybe better suited for like that aspect of tech. So I kind of took a very long and unnecessary route to get to design. Could have been a lot shorter if I listened to my mother. So this is a lesson, listen to your mother.
You know what? That's actually my catchphrase. So yeah.
What most people that think of going to a coding boot camp, you think that you end up being a computer programmer or a developer in your job. So it's interesting to hear your perspective that you're not a computer programmer, but you've moved into a different role into tech, which means there's more than one way to get into tech, and you're doing it through UX and UI.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you like and what do you dislike about what you do?
Okay, so what I like is I do just love design. I love kind of taking a set of requirements or a set of requirements and kind of breaking it down into finding the best user experience. What I don't like, I think this is a struggle that maybe some designers have at certain companies. Not all companies are like this, but it can happen where you're kind of having to justify the process you go through to get to where you're going. And this can happen in other parts of tech, I imagine, as well, in other roles. But it's kind of like people just want to get to the end. And when you're trying to slow them down a little bit by adding your process in, it can kind of feel like you're having to justify your job, which is no fun for people.
I can imagine. So the thing is, it feels like your role combines art with technology. And, you know, the old saying, there's no wrong way to do art, obviously doesn't hold with UX UI, because if it's not intuitive, it's not, you know, user friendly. How do you sort of blend the artistic aspect of your role with needing it to be intuitive and user friendly and making sure your end user has something aesthetically pleasing, but also intuitive to use?
Yeah, I think for me, that making something aesthetically pleasing is so far at the end of what I do. There's so much stuff that happens before that. Just making the user experience is the primary point. So it takes a long time before I'm even worried about how it looks aesthetically. And I try to remind people throughout the process that, like, that's not the problem. Don't worry about that. Like, it'll look better soon, I promise. But that's not the important part. So I think that is actually the hardest part, is the stuff in between. I think developers, product managers, product owners, they kind of understand the pretty part or the aesthetic part. Like that's the part that they understand. So I don't have to convince them that things need to look nice for the user. It's all that stuff to lead up to that and the information I need from them and the support I need from them to get to that point. That's the struggle, actually.
So what tools do you use on a day-to-day basis in your job? And what are the primary things that you accomplish every day in your job? So as you're doing your UX designs and skills and stuff like that, are you interviewing people? Are you trying to determine what you need to put into a product or not put into a product? And what tools do you use to accomplish your job on a day-to-day basis?
So the tools I use are primarily Sketch, Acture. Those are what I use for kind of prototyping wireframes. I also use Photoshop, sometimes Illustrator. I've actually started looking at using Sketch more in replacement of Photoshop. Sketch can kind of do some of the things that people primarily use Photoshop for, so I've been playing around with that because I think it's a little more intuitive. And on a daily basis, I spend a lot of time gathering information because it's hard to redesign something that was already built. And some things I'm redesigning were built years ago without understanding the purpose for them. There's a lot of, when you're dealing with larger applications, there's a lot of technical requirements and so basically there's a lot of reasons why decisions were made that are sometimes because of the software or the back end. So things that would be a better user experience may not be possible based on our software limitations. So it's just a lot of understanding who made the decision, where it was made, and why it was made so that I can come up with a better experience. So just tracking down, I feel like a detective a little bit, kind of tracking down the right people to talk to and understand how we got to where we are so that we can make a better experience.
Okay, so I've seen this phenomenon occur wherein people who are not in tech, they have no idea what goes into building a web application. They go through a boot camp, they come out the other side, and suddenly they're very critical of every website they encounter. Is it amplified for you, since your job is to make things intuitive, when you're on someone else's site and you can't figure out where to go? Is it worse, or are you more empathetic because you know their struggle and it might not be their fault?
That's interesting. So definitely earlier in my career, it was everything was awful. How did it get past anyone? How was this decision made? I definitely found it hard to just use websites at all for applications. Just everything was awful. And now I just kind of know that I'm going to judge every site, and I don't even think about it anymore. Now I go, oh, that's a bad experience, and then just move on, because I just can't. It is a little bit, I don't know, beautiful mind. You're just like breaking down. How did they get here, and why would they make that? And now you just like, I move on. I just assume every experience is bad, and if it's a good experience, then I'm just pleasantly surprised. But it does make it kind of like a bummer to go around the internet and just be disappointed. I know everyone, like, I'm sure you could break down my work too and be like, why was this made? And there's so many decisions that get made that are above you that you have no control over when a website or application goes into production. So there could be bad experience out there and had nothing to do with the designer at all, because sometimes you just don't have that kind of control. So try not to be judgmental, but I definitely try not to be judgmental, but I definitely does make it hard. Every site is why would they do that? And what was the point of that? Or why did they take that feature away? That's my biggest one, is when features get taken away that was useful. And you're like, why would you remove that functionality?
So when you go through and you do your gathering of information and you try to see, should this feature be in, or why do we have this feature? Why was this ever put in there? Since you've been on your team, what changes have you brought about, to your applications that y'all work with that have improved the application itself? And what did you do exactly to help make that improvement?
So just to give a little background, I basically work on bank sites for like consumer rewards. So if you get a credit card, spend a certain amount of points, you can redeem those for points or for merchandise or something like that. But also work on the back end part, so maybe customer service parts of that application so they can help customers go through that process. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with like what customer service apps look like, but they're never really helpful. Like there's a lot of steps, and that's why it takes so long when you're on a call with someone, because they're going through so many screens and so many different places to find the information to help you. So something that we started thinking through is how we can make that process better, because this customer service experience is better than the customer's experience is better. So introducing kind of wizards, or like maybe you call them steppers. So if there's 5 steps in a process, showing that, making them like showing the process so people know how many steps there are, so they go through and see it, making it less trips to other screens to get certain tasks done. And I think that's kind of a new way of looking at those kind of applications and trying to get to that point in all of our applications.
Interesting. Yeah, I've often wondered, with every company is a software company now. That's just part of living in this age. But obviously we put a lot more time and money and attention on client-facing applications. But that's interesting, trying to change the way you're doing more of an internal facing. I don't know. I love taking the time to make it, because that's got to make it easier on your customer service reps as well.
Yes.
Like they're the ones that get shot as messengers.
Yes.
I hope they give you excellent Christmas presents.
All right, Angel, I have another question for you. With what you did from, like I mentioned earlier, you went from a coding boot camp. Instead of being a programmer, you went into UX design. For people that are interested in following in your footsteps, what recommendation can you provide to people that are looking at possibly getting into UX design? From what type of skills would make somebody successful in this arena? And then what steps can somebody start taking today to get to the point where they can get into tech to have the exact same type of job that you have now?
Okay, so I generally recommend people do kind of the same thing I did, which is start with a coding boot camp. And I also recommend that they start with a development job first before trying to move directly into UX. A, I think it's easier to find those jobs. B, I think it's great to have some level of understanding of development, even if you move on to design. And then C, if you might decide that you actually do like development and not even want to transition into design. I know it happened to me, and I kind of regret this, and I see it happen to people all the time, because I go back to my boot camp and I talk to people who are a little freaked out about getting their first development job and a little overwhelmed and maybe think that they weren't the best in their class and how are they going to find a job. And so they just default to, okay, I'll look for a job in design. And sometimes I wonder if they really want a job in design or if they're just scared to get a job as a developer. So I would recommend just trying that first, because if you're trying to transition from your coding boot camp experience to design and you do it at a company you're already at, the transition's a little easier. They'll let you make that transition sometimes in that company you're working for. Whereas if you just finish a boot camp for web development and then look for a UX UI role, it's a little tougher. It's a little harder to find a junior UX role, especially if you have no experience. So I think that's kind of an in if you start there. And you never know, you might like development better.
So if someone's trying to move towards UX, the standard boot camp sort of prescription for one's portfolio is have plenty of repos, do excellent READMEs that list out what you used, what the purpose of this homework was, or what have you. How would you recommend, if someone wanted to transition more towards UX, building their portfolio, what should they be highlighting if that's the role they're targeting?
So there's so many different ways to do it. I don't know that there's one tool. you definitely need a portfolio. You definitely need a couple of projects. How you get them is a little tougher. So there's always looking for freelance work. There's taking a project that already exists and kind of doing a case study of it and redoing it that way. A lot of people do that. Some people feel that's a good way to do it, some don't. Someone starting a business or has a website, maybe you want to approach them and ask them if you can work on it so you can add to your portfolio. Create your own project, or maybe you have a friend who's a developer, or you went to, a coding boot camp with someone who has a project that they have been kind of working on, and maybe you can work on that project to help give them some structure and strategy for their projects. I mean, there's numerous ways to add projects to your portfolio, but you definitely need some. So any one of those, I think, will work.
Excellent.
For getting into your role that you have in tech, is it absolutely necessary for somebody to have a college degree?
No. So a lot of people think I have a degree, and I do not. I kind of went through multiple phases in my life. So I have multiple attempts at a degree, but not. And if you added up all of my years of experience at college, it would equal like 1.5 degrees. But I never got one. And even before I got into tech, I got a role as a director of operations at a law firm, and I got that without a degree. And I was a compliance manager in a finance department for a tech company, and I didn't have a degree. So I feel like beyond tech, in whatever role you take, if you are competent and qualified and really good at selling yourself, you don't need a degree. I've never had a degree, and it never held me back.
Excellent. I'm always curious about what I call past lives, because I know very few people in this industry who just, who just started out, I'm going to get a degree in computer science, and this is what I'm going to do my entire life. And, they're out there. But more and more, we all have past lives where we did something else and had to transition. So I'm always fascinated. I would never have pegged you as running a law firm. I love that.
And I am doing property taxes and sales taxes at a company. I have had a couple of past lives that are like, what? Very, not artistic, not creative. I always say this. I used to have the most boring job at the best or the coolest companies. I had the most boring role. So yeah, I did a lot, but I think they've all helped me in some way to where I am today. I brought along experiences from those jobs definitely into what I do now.
Yeah. That's important to hear, because a lot of people think tech, they one-to-one think that means being a programmer, and that's not true. There are many more roles available for you to get into in tech, and you're one example of that. And you can also show that you can get into it without a degree and with the very background that you can transition into something else to get into tech. We'll put in the show notes a link to a video that Valerie and I created about all the different roles that are available in tech, and we talk about each one's, and then how you can get into them. So we'll share that in the show notes. So we're getting close to the end of our interview, Angel. So one of the things, 2 quick questions we wanted to ask you here at the end is, for people that are interested in getting into design, you've told us a little bit about what your route is and all of that, but if people go out and they interview for a job, what kind of questions can they expect when they go in to interview for a UX type of job?
So I think the most common question, or maybe one of the more important questions that you'll be asked, is what is your design process? It's similar to maybe even how a developer interview would work. They want to understand how you think, and they want to understand how you made the decisions that you made and how you got to where you needed to get to solve a problem. So that question kind of speaks to that. So I think that's going to be one that you will be commonly asked is, what is your design process?
That's awesome. That definitely will help people that are interested in getting into tech and going in that direction. So last question that we have, nothing related to UX design, unless you want it to be, is what thing would you recommend for people Can be anything that you would like to recommend.
Oh
Something that
man.
makes life better.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this question and I always have different answers when I'm asked, but I think I'm realizing more and more that I know Jennifer knows this. I try to stress the importance of social media to people in the advancement of their career. I think there's a lot of bad about social media, but if you leverage it correctly, I think there's a lot of good to it. I've gotten a lot of opportunities from people I just kind of Twitter know, which is like a thing now. It's like you can know someone in person and then you can also like Twitter know someone. And when you start a relationship with someone on Twitter, it's hard to imagine that such a superficial relationship could help you in your career, but it's absolutely helped me. I've gotten job opportunities and project opportunities from people that I have not even met in person. So I also think it's a great place to get questions. You know, especially if you're learning or you're just starting out and you want to understand things, there are people who are very large in tech who are on Twitter and willing to help you if you just ask them a question. I know John Papa, like really big in Angular, just put out a tweet recently and said, if you want some mentoring or some advice or questions, you have just DM me. So DMs are open, people who could really help your career, who could just help you learn things. And I think you just try to leverage social media in a more constructive way to help your career.
Now, when you say constructive,
Mm-hmm.
is arguing with strangers over what you did? Constructive? Am I doing it wrong?
That is one way to use Twitter. Another way is to engage with other people who are asking questions about technology or who are offering advice or, asking, just engaging with people in a way that is not argumentative would be a suggestion I would try. I think I can do both. It's I can multitask, but I just think I definitely think that there are a lot of things that happened in my career that I have to thank people that I met on Twitter, and I just want people to have that same experience with it. For example, Tracy Lee is someone who I met on Twitter before I met her in person, and she has helped me in ways I don't even think she knows. So, yeah, try to use it in a way that it's helpful, and if it's making you unhappy, stop. No one's forcing you to use it, but I think you can use it in a way that makes you feel good, and it is really helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's excellent advice. Thank you.
So thank you, Angel, for being our guest today. We will put links in the show notes for the things that you've recommended in the show today, and what people can do to get into tech, and share your path with us. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.